All right, welcome to another episode of Net Chasers. Today we have Kalei Mahi, who is a expert. I'm going to say expert at NIL, but what I appreciate with everything that you're about to hear is how she's gone from being a student athlete and having that arc of that eye on college athletics, the changing landscape, but where should we go? So Kalei, thank you for being part of this, being here. Why don't you start off by just weaving through that career that got you to where you're at now, running your own shop. But let me also tag on, in your lens, what is the current state of college athletics?
Oh man, well, thank you for having me. My career, if we're going to start to the beginning, I started in Syracuse, New York as a D1 swimmer and loved my time in the snow, go orange. But after college, I had kind of this epiphany of like, what am I going to do next? Because everything had sort of been mapped out for me when I was in college, and the resources are available to you while you're there. But once you leave the university and you're kind of on your own, you're in this sort of culture shock moment of, I got to figure this out on my own. So I ended up going to the city like everybody else did, and ended up in publishing for American Express. And I loved it. It was great. But, New York 25 years ago was a vastly different place. And I was making probably less than $30,000 a year working for Amex. And after a while, I got to see how on the publishing side, the business was impacting, this global financial institution. There were so many different avenues to this company that was fascinating, but ended up going back to California because I got tired of being cold and in the snow, and did a stint in hospitality. But, one day on the golf course, I ended up meeting Sony Pictures television president, Steve Mosco. And the guy had asked me, what do you want to do with your life? Because I don't think this is it, and he was right. I didn't want to be on the golf course, on the hospitality sector. I love my time at Pebble Beach, but I was there for a very brief stint before he opened up a door for me and said, why don't you come work for me at Sony? So I went into the entertainment sector for a little bit, on the TV side, working with shows like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and King of Queens. And it was a great opportunity to sort of see what the entertainment side of the business looked like. But then uprooted again and went to the East Coast and had an opportunity to interview with Turner Sports and the entire Turner property, in fact. And I had Steve Mosco behind me at the time and said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure that you stay in the entertainment sector. And I did 13 interviews and didn't get a single job. And then did one interview with the Coca-Cola company. And they said, you're hired. When can you start? And that moment changed my life forever in terms of brand exposure, because this was a huge globally recognized heritage legacy brand that I had a lot to learn from. So fortunate enough to work with the FIFA World Cup and the Olympics for Beijing and for Vancouver. And there was just this, eye-opening experience of bringing new products to market. So Coke Zero, it was an amazing opportunity to see Coke Zero get lifted off the ground in the beginning. But like that, my boss, I call him my coach, but my boss at the time had said, listen, if you want to upgrade into this, career path of yours, if you want to become a higher level than what you are, you need to have a stint in the agency world. You need to understand we have the money and we have the product. We need help with the media and the direction. So partnerships, sponsorships, all of those things, you have to get boots on the ground and learn from the agency side of the business. And I took that dare and I was like, all right, I'm out. So I left and went to work for a division of Saatchi & Saatchi called Team One. It was the luxury agency for Lexus. And it was an incredible opportunity to understand Lexus from a global portfolio, but also a national impact. So worked on the USGA partnership to box out Mercedes-Benz, worked on food and wine business and some of their philanthropic opportunities, which was fantastic. But I really got to drill down and see what a company and a car company like Lexus was doing to try and change their image to this younger buyer. Because historically, Lexus thought my consumer is going to be in their 60s and in their 70s because they can afford our cars. But we need to, skew younger now. And golf was an avenue to do that because golf is looking to skew younger as well. So great partnership. But, living out of a suitcase for 20 plus weeks out of the year when you're traveling for golf is difficult. And at the time, AT&T had just acquired DirecTV. And so I got an opportunity to jump ship from the agency side back to brand side, working for AT&T. And I worked for the Dan Patrick and the Rich Eisen shows. And it was such an incredible experience because they're a multi-distributed show. Radio first, then on NBCSN, then they were on Podcast One and iHeartRadio. So it's like all of these media opportunities, right? To have an opportunity to monetize in a different way besides the spots and dots was such a great challenge. So I came in and I worked with companies like Traeger Grills. Amazing experience. They bought the spots and dots, and then we integrated them a little more seamlessly into the show with Meat Friday. If you've ever watched the show, we would bring their chefs out once a week to cook, and they had their own segment during a break, and it was a way for us to find a fourth or fifth monetization opportunity. So really great experience working for them. And then, the world blew up in 2020, and Miami Super Bowl was a tough one because Kobe had just passed away earlier in that week. And unfortunately, AT&T said, we're going to sell off the shows and, we can't keep everybody. So, thoughts and prayers. Thanks for all the work. That was okay because it gave us an opportunity to pivot into another direction. And I ended up going to another agency to work on influencer for a while with YouTube. Great experience. And then left that agency to go to another traditional ad agency called The Many. Worked on eBay, Gin Ramen, Bang Energy, NOS Energy. It was such a great company to work for, but they needed some help trying to figure out how to build an influencer division, but also scale that influencer division. So I had an opportunity to really dig into where the creator economy is going. And I saw that with NIL, there are so many open opportunities for student athletes to monetize their NIL, but they just need to know how to do it properly. And there's a lot of bad actors in this industry. So I saw an education gap and I jumped on it and said, let me help these kids because I was them at one point in my career. I was a D1 athlete. I did my time on the brands and now I did my time on the agency and I did my time on the influencer. So let me help these kids sort of navigate the waters and their parents navigate the waters cleanly so that they're protected, that they feel like they know what they're doing before they bring in a team who's going to take, 20% of their check right off the top. So that's a long-winded answer, but
yeah, but
the state of, you had asked about the state of where I think college sports are going.
Right.
This education situation is becoming younger and younger. And I think that schools are going to start looking at athletes as how can they bring more eyeballs and visibility to my program through their social media networks? How do we broaden our reach and our audience through them? So I think they're going to take a look at that from a recruiting perspective and see, what can these kids bring to us besides their big talent, and their ethic and their work, their hard work and their big brains, for these classes, because they got to stay on top of grades. So I think there's going to be a harder look at the 360 picture of the student athlete, not just the athlete themselves.
And I think that's been the gap, right? It's athletic departments have always sat in a role where, student athletes needed them.
Yep.
And I think what you just said is a very interesting mark because it's going to force ADs to kind of turn that mirror around saying, well, there's a lot of reach. So if you were advising maybe, that new AD on the real NIL reality, what would be like, what would be your talking points? Maybe the 2 or 3 talking points, but where are the blind spots? Like, where is that forward thinking?
So as far as forward thinking goes, right now athletic departments they're bogged down with trying to navigate the rev share. They're trying to understand how we don't create more donor fatigue, because for a long time it was about, how are we in the facilities race? How do we try and create these facilities, these world-class facilities that kids are going to want to come to and stay at? But I think now they have to get creative on bringing student athletes in. So if they can provide resources, I would say this to any AD, is that you need to bring in experts in spaces that don't necessarily are 100% aligned to athletics, right? So for me, yes, I have the athletic background, but there are folks out there who have an expertise in the creator economy and can talk to these kids on a regular basis about what does it mean? Yes, we talk about build your brand, and post consistently, but do they understand how to interpret their analytics on the back end of all of their social media? Are they leveraging their schools on the business or the communication side to help these kids sort of demystify the social channels and social strategies? What does that look like? And I think you've got compliance officers out there who are trying to stay on top of making sure these kids are staying eligible and they aren't doing anything to put themselves or the school at risk. But does a compliance officer understand what social strategy means? Probably not, and that's not their fault. But I think that schools need to bring in more resources from the outside to help these kids understand. We're going to help you not only build your brand, but help you understand what the data looks like for you on an analytical perspective. But then we're also going to help set you up for success when you leave here and graduate, because we know less than 2%, 1% pro future. So we need to sort of help these kids ramp up for what life looks like beyond college. And one opportunity is to help these kids understand how to show up, how to talk to agencies, how to talk to brands, how to advocate for themselves. Because again, these kids are so laser focused on making sure that they're the best in their sport. They don't get injured, that they're maintaining their grades to stay eligible. But are we teaching them how to show up, be communicative, be collaborative, or over communicate with a brand partnership? If it's a transactional relationship, I pay you money, you give me a piece of content. Okay, but who's teaching the kids to think beyond the transaction and think relationship, think long term? Because we don't want them to chase money. We want them to sort of build these reputations with brands so that they're not always chasing these small, insignificant deals. We want them to go after the $5,000, the $10,000, and the $15,000 deals. And you don't have to be, basketball. You don't have to be football. You can be an Olympic sport and still command that kind of money if the strategy and the execution are, correct. But that's my 2 cents, is just bringing the resources to help, and I think, again, there's this idea of, we don't want to spend too much money. How do we unlock this, internally? How do we bring in the resources, keep it under our own roof? But have people like myself or anybody else who's in the same sort of service industry to make sure that these kids are protected. How do you bring us in to help set you up infrastructure wise, and then we cycle out so that you can run it? We're not here to just leech on to the athletic department and siphon off money, and not show you any kind of return. But we want to make sure that these kids feel like I made the right decision coming to college, because they've afforded me all of these resources and opportunities to learn more, or to do more, and it set me up for my future. So.
Well, you brought a good point up. What do institutions want from we'll start with students, but even student athletes? I mean, we've all probably got a call or email the last few weeks about the fall appeal, and wanting alumni to give back. And I just wonder if ADs and administrators are thinking that long or that far out, because if they invest in that student athlete now and prepare them for the world, the return could be a gift, that they're earning because they get it. So where should administrators, coaches, where should they create the space to either be the team for student athlete, and I'm talking about the media team, right? Yep. The manager and the advisor and all that, or to bring in people like yourself to help with that? Why is there a discrepancy between a Power 4 decision and then the mid-major decision to do that?
That is such a great question. I think it goes back to a lot of these athletic directors are overwhelmed with how much information, right? We've got the SCORE Act, we've got the SAFE Act, we've got rev share, we've got donor fatigue, we've got all of these things, right? And when there are folks like us who come in with a vision to say, let's set up a process that or resources for you. Let's help you build resources within your organization to help kids navigate content creation, to help them navigate the legal side of things, because contracts can be tricky, right? Anytime you see in perpetuity, run away, or make sure you have enough zeros attached to the end of it to make sure that it's worth your while, because in perpetuity is just a dangerous game to play with a brand, and kids don't know any better. But I'm meandering from the point, but my point is that we bring these institutions I hate the word playbook, but essentially you're putting together a playbook for them and saying, let's create something that not only helps you retain student athletes, right? We don't want them to jump ship, and we don't want them to go away, because we know what the cost of trying to recruit or fill that space is going to cost this department. If we can provide resources that incentivize kids to stay in the program, you also have a retention opportunity for the student athletes, but then students feel like they can be a part of, this industry as well, who have an interest. And that's a recruiting tool for any school who has a comm school or an entrepreneurial program like TCU or Tennessee or even Syracuse. There's so many programs out there that we can tap, and we aggregate all of these departments together and say, okay, let us set you up for the future. You use this as a recruiting tool for your student athletes as well as your students. It's an incubator lab. Call it whatever you want whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you've created this sort of house where student athletes can go and get the support they need, from the media perspective, from the content creation, from the editing to the contract reviews to the pitch decks. All of this can live under one roof. Bring in a team of advisors and administrators and professors to make sure the work is consistent and you're compliant. But once you've got that, the rest of us cycle out. And I think when you've got these smaller programs who are interested in doing that, their biggest fear and hesitation is to say, I have the money to do this. I'll figure it out, but I just don't know if I can do this yet. Is there a phased approach that we can take to make sure that this program gets off the ground? Whereas the Power Fours are saying, I've got to figure out how to keep my Olympic sports programs. I got to raise the money. I got to make sure my facilities are on top of things. I'm understaffed. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to do this. So I think it's going to take one, big program to say, we're going to make an investment in the future. We're going to put the dollars, we're going to allocate the dollars for this to create a group, a team of advisors to help with finance, to help with legal, to help with compliance, to help with strategy, to help with content creation. And we spend money to make money on the back end. So I think eventually, the mid-majors will catch up, and I think they will see the value of, we can do stuff creatively under our own roof through our different schools, comms or business schools. And why wouldn't you do that? I mean, Legacy Frogs right now is a great program. It's foundationally a great program to model, an extension of that. The Legacy Frogs, for those who don't know, is an incubator program that is directed through the entrepreneurial school. They only take a handful of student athletes into the program to help them navigate, pitch decks and content creation. And it's all student led. It's not, a class of any sort, but it's more of a club. And these kids can come in and get the support they need. Now they're small scale because they can't accommodate everybody at at the jump. But the basic idea is that kids can come in, from every sport, not just football, and can come in and get the support that they need. And Legacy Frogs is doing a great job. I think from a scale perspective, you bring somebody like an Alabama or Georgia or a USC or a UCLA in to help these kids on a bigger scale. And that becomes the playbook for every other school from mid-major down to a JUCO level, who could say, we can put this program into place and run it and try and do it with a limited budget. But nobody's really talking about that right now.
Right.
We've got so many segments out there who are very finance heavy, or who are very legal heavy, or very brand forward. And that's okay. It's just, let's get everybody together in one room. And I think it's just going to take one program to say, yeah, let's give it a shot and see what happens.
I think Steve Jobs is historically known for the signal versus noise,
Totally.
and how he's built up Apple, or how he did build it
Yeah.
up. But there is a lot of noise right now, and I think and I spent basically my entire career mid-major, and
Right.
how we always thought, how do we stand apart by not overreach, because we just don't have the staff.
Right.
You worked on some big brands, Sony, AT&T. Like, where should an athlete be thinking in terms of, and take maybe the freshman, just that very raw and green, but are they looking for a one-off? Are they looking for the repeat? Are they, you talked about the zeros behind it, and what should they be getting in line? But I'm going to take that coach perspective. As a coach, what should I be helping them with,
Sure.
just from the jump?
Yeah, great question. Well, if we back this up even further in the education gap, from my perspective, and this is just my humble opinion, if you are a student athlete who is walking into your university or your college or whatever it is, JUCO level on up, the day you step foot on there, if you don't have an idea of who you are as a personal brand, as an athlete, as a person, you're already behind the ball. So for a coach starting at ground zero with a student athlete who's interested in NIL but has no idea what that means, you're putting more time and energy and resources into helping that kid understand, okay, step one is you need to be active on social. You need to be posting consistently. You need to take a look at the things that are performing well, and then, adjust from there. We look at the analytics side of things. Go through your dashboards on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Instagram and see, how are my pieces performing? If one piece performed better than another, do more of that. A coach can say, do more of that. But to answer your question about going after those long-term partnerships, I think, again, it has to be this slow burn. The kids are going to be starting at ground zero, where they're just going to start tagging brands in their posts that they interact with on a daily basis. And you may have some kids say, well, I'm doing brand posting for free. Well, you got to start somewhere, because on the side of the table, on the agency side and the brand side, there are all of these amazing tools available to us to do social listening. So you look at, like, Creator IQ, for example, is a great tool to use for discovery of content creators, but also look at the metrics of how they're performing on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of the social platforms. And it'll say, they have a 3% engagement rate, and that's fantastic. They're worth talking to and engaging with because they also represent your brand, or this person lives and breathes your brand ethos. Cool. But for these kids, I think when you walk in, you need to start thinking about, who do you want to engage with brand wise. I had one student athlete recently. She's a water polo player. She's fantastic. And she said, well, these are the brands that I would love to work with. And it was Tiffany, it was Cartier, it was, Tag Heuer, it was Rolex. And I'm like, I love that for you. That's so aspirational. But if you take a look at who they have partnered with in the past, they're looking at Tiger Woods level style golfers on up. Cartier doesn't historically partner with student athletes. So while that's a great aspirational thing to shoot for, it's probably not realistic. You're more realistic at looking at Drip Drop, Liquid IV, Smart Water, Powerade, Body Armor, things that are a little more endemic to your sport, or endemic adjacent. So from a coaching perspective, like, if my student athlete, if a swimmer came to me and said, Kalei, I want to get started on my NIL journey, what do I need to do? The first thing I would do is audit their social page and say, okay, what do you have? Oh, I see you only have 2 posts, and the last time you posted was April of 2024. You're not going to get an NIL deal based off of the lack of posting. So you're going to have to play catch up and start posting things like behind the scenes when you're working out, or what is your recovery routine? What are the things that you're doing at home? Are you doing get readies with me? Do you do vlog style stuff to let people know who you are? And that's where I would start with them first, is the audit of their social, and then go from there and help them figure out the strategy piece of it. But if we back this up even further, kids in high school, we know 41 states across the country are allowed to monetize their NIL, and state to state, of course, we know is different. But these kids need to start younger. I mean, I have a client who is 12, and his parents want him to be the next Bo Jackson. Phenomenal at football, phenomenal at baseball, but what are we doing to figure out what his brand looks like? Because at 12 years old, when you love Nerf guns and Legos and Roblox and Minecraft, is that the same brand that you're going to love when you're in your 20s or in your late teens and you're at college? Is that this kind of brand you want to engage with? Spoiler alert, Roblox is doing amazing things with content creators. So like, no knock to them by any means, but we have to tailor a brand personality that is going to grow and adapt with his kid. But the fact that his parents recognize that at 12 years old, we want to see him have a future and be able to monetize his NIL. What do we have to do? They're starting as young as possible. We put some guardrails up to make sure that we're not doing things that would, jeopardize his safety or who he is, or set him up for failure. But we've got to figure out a path for growth for him. And so the younger we can start educating these kids and their families on contract language and on financial or fiscal responsibility, with branding and, content creation strategy, the better position they are for when they step onto campus their freshman year, whether they redshirt or not. They have a foundation going into their college years where they can be successful. And that will also teach them the business acumen that they need post-graduation, going into their first, real job if they choose not to be their own boss.
Well, that kind of does a perfect segue to, so after, let's say you have a senior and they are volleyball's starting to end, football's going to end here pretty soon. Yep. Basketball's kicking up, obviously, but at the end of their senior year, is there a portfolio that they should have? Is there, how do you package all of this so that after you leave the brand, you are your own brand? And I'm talking about leaving the brand of the school. Power Four's brand, a little stronger than a mid-major, and D2 is different and all that. But once you leave that brand, I just feel it's so hard for these student athletes to now become professionals. Yeah. And to control that narrative.
It's a great point. It's a great question. For these kids who spend the time to build their brand and to build their personality, some are lucky enough to roll this into their future and into their career. I mean, I think unfortunately the media has done a fabulous job of, putting the sexy headlines out of the football players who are monetizing taking these big 7-figure deals, right? And that's maybe 3% of the total pie, where you see 97% of these athletes are taking deals that are much smaller, anywhere from, 300 on up to 3,500, maybe 10 grand in there. But the average deal is fairly small. Maybe we look at it as grownups, right? As there being small deals, but to a kid who's 19 years old, who gets $3,500 for a post and a reel and an Instagram story, that's a ton of money for them. So how do they sort of expand beyond that? As these kids right now in this generation of Gen Z and going into Gen Alpha, they're becoming much more savvy, technologically savvy, strategic. They have all these great examples on YouTube for what it's like to become a YouTube creator. I mean, my own sons had said to me, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a YouTube creator. And I'm like, oh my God, what? But you forget that, the Mr. Beasts of the world are making hundreds of millions of dollars through their platforms. And that's amazing. Do I want my kids to put themselves out there like that and open themselves up to criticism and things like that? Maybe not. But for other kids, they think, yeah, I can do this. I can turn this into a career. I can turn this into a brand. There's athletes out there right now who are looking at, what has my sport done for me? Where are some things that I would like to see my sport change? What are some things that I could bring into my sport? And there are kids right now graduating college who know that they're not going to the NFL or the NBA or the MLB or any other professional team. And they're saying, okay, now I want to pivot into my next thing, which is I would like to start my own hydration brand, or I want to start my own deodorant brand. I mean, the things that kids are coming up with today are wild, and they're asking questions of like, is the deodorant category, old and antiquated, and how can I modernize this a little bit and make it a little more sexy and fun and youthful for my generation? So they start to invest and they talk to other athletes and they collaborate together. So I think these kids become much more entrepreneurial focused than they've ever been in the past. And they look at the brand and the portfolio of work that they've done over the course of 4 or 5 years and say, okay, now I can pivot into something different. I can create my own thing. And that's why I started NextGen Legacy, was because I want their legacy to go beyond just their sport. Once they retire, they don't feel like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to try and find a 9-to-5 job and figure it out. No, let's motivate these kids to create something for themselves and then, grow that into generational wealth in the future. So,
well, what is your, so you brought up NIL, you brought up, what, administrators, coaches can all do. Where are you with the leadership of the NCAA, NIL Go? Like, is it helping, hurting? Where are we with the, and I don't mean leadership as people. I just mean,
sure.
We got to kind of play by the rules. And right now it's the NCAA or state rules, federal rules. But like, where is that? Is it holding this opportunity back? Is it enhancing it? Just where are we with all of that?
NIL Go, I think in theory it was a great idea to sort of police, or not police, I would say just sort of put a tent around the circus to make sure that people were doing this in a fair way, that, female athletes and male athletes, weren't being screwed, for, lack of better terms.
Right.
It's a difficult space because when you see articles that are written about how NIL Go has 4 full-time staff members trying to approve hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deals, and then they're bringing on a snitch line, like, what are we doing? I mean, when did we start thinking that crowdsourcing, policing deals was a great idea? That's terrible. Right. I mean, because for all we know, you could have a disgruntled teammate, or you could have a disgruntled brand, or somebody call this tip line and say, hey, I don't think, so-and-so's deal is legit. I think that this is pay for play and you need to launch an investigation. That sucks. Well, I mean, we're wasting a lot of time, and we're, clogging the channels of deals getting approved because they had to take a time out to investigate a snitch line, tip. So, and there's a lot of schools, and I can't, divulge who specifically, but I'm sure there's a lot of schools out there who have just said, screw it, we're going to ask for forgiveness instead of permission at this point, and we're just going to get these deals going. I wrote a LinkedIn piece not that long ago about how NIL Go I had an issue with from a brand and an agency perspective, because when you are investing millions of dollars into, say, March Madness, we're going to start planning March Madness, June of, the previous year, June of 2025, going into 2026, just to make sure that we are hitting the campaign deadlines. Like, that's awful. And that's a lot of pressure for brands and agencies to go through to try and stay compliant and to do, go through the proper channels to get everything vetted and approved. And if there's red lines in the contracts, then that has to go back. So the back and forth, that there's just another barrier that makes things difficult. And I think, there are some kids who are like, oh, like, I can't deal with the back and forth. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore because it's too cumbersome and I don't feel like I'm getting enough money out of all of this. So they take a step back. And which is totally fine, by the way. Like, NIL isn't for everybody. If this is detrimental to their mental health, or, they're slipping in their grades, or they're not performing well, or they're too consumed by deliverables, take a step back. That's okay. There's power in no. There's power in refocusing. But getting back to the point, NIL Go, I think, is a barrier for a lot of brands and agencies because if you remember last year during or this year during March Madness, there were a lot of viral moments that happened in real time that brands jumped on. And that's fantastic. And you need that quick response to stay relevant as a brand in big cultural moments like that. If we were to follow the letter of the law and NIL Go, they're going to say, well, we just missed the viral moment because our
Right.
stuff is stuck in the back channels. So what do we do? I think there was an intention, maybe a good intention, to try and put a tent around the circus, but it just clogs everybody up. I think there's got to be a better way to do this. I think we've got to, if you want to keep NIL Go, you need to change the dollar amount, from $600 to something that's a little more realistic and significant, like 1,500, 3,500, so that you don't have to worry about getting clogged with these smaller deals that you have to review on a regular basis. I think there's also this misconception of, well, who has the right to tell me that, one deliverable, for Instagram and a TikTok reel or a TikTok piece, I should only make $1,000 off of that. I have 30,000 followers on Instagram and I have 60,000 followers on TikTok, but you're only going to pay me this much, but you're going to pay, somebody like a Livy Dunn. Maybe we have an apples to apples in terms of follower count and engagement rate, but you're going to pay her more than you're going to pay me. Why? So I think there's this hesitation of like, well, who deserves more money and who's NIL Go to tell me that I'm not worth it? So I don't love NIL Go, to be honest with you. No knock to the NCAA for trying to put something in place, but I just think when we look at Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Gatorade, Powerade, all of these brands, they're going to say, oh, like, I got to go through this. This is awful. This takes too long. And the agencies are then, put under pressure by the brands to say, well, why can't you push this forward? Why didn't you anticipate this? And the brand and the agencies are saying, we are anticipating it. It's just moving really slowly.
I feel like it's just another compliance office, that and compliance, obviously they know the book, they know the rules, but NIL Go may not have that history or experience being on the agency side or the brand side to understand, like, we are those little battleships. We need to move. Now, how should an AD or I know it's in-house now, but some of those collectives and all that, the fair market stuff, how can they help with the assessment of what a brand can do for their student athletes, but also help assess the student athlete to understand, like, okay, like, that's just not in line with what you want to do. Like, and I know you kind of mentioned this is the work, this is the education work, but when dollars are at the table, those speak. So whether it's from the donors or the pressure from the AD, so how do we kind of get this in line so that not the stars, but maybe the non-stars who want to build on their brand, how do they get successful? How do the mid majors, 5, 6, 7, 8 person on the roster, how do they achieve success?
With the mid majors, I look at Olympic sports as, the ones with the most opportunities. I also look at tennis and golf, not to say that they're not Olympic sports, but I think of them in their own categories. These ADs, when they're looking at the NIL, collectives and the available funds that they have to them, they've got to, first of all, they need to know who has the appetite for this, right? There may be some kids out there who are like, I'm good. I don't need this. I'm fine. I'm not interested. It's too much work, or I just don't know how to do it. Thanks for the resources, but my class schedule is too heavy for me to add one more thing to my plate. And that's okay. And you can evaluate from there, where you can funnel some extra dollars to the team. UCLA does a really good job of giving the collectives will give money over to the coaches to say, okay, hey, you've got a bucket of money, let's just call it $20,000 that you can use to give to your student athletes. There's a couple of local brands here that are interested. Let's figure out how we can give your athletes some dollars to play with, give them an opportunity for brand partnership. But those coaches can also use those NIL collective dollars to bring in advisors specifically for their team to help them navigate the brand journey or the brand partnership, or creating pitch decks for these student athletes to hit their community with. But I think that it's a long-winded answer, but I think that there's just an opportunity for ADs to have conversations with their coaches and say, hey, let's help you unlock some funds to bring resources in to help your athletes so that they feel valued and they feel like not everything is going to basketball or football. But there's, again, going back to the infrastructure and trying to create resources available for everybody, bringing those advisors to come in and help, I think is the best opportunity for a school to just put a line in the sand and say, we see you, we hear you, we understand what you're looking for, and we're going to be able to support that for you by offering this, these resources. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, perfectly. Before I ask the last couple, I just want to acknowledge, I think having a former athlete, first of all, in the house, but two, you've kind of hit, every mile marker and lane of what the opportunity could be for a student athlete to go all in to NIL, so I just want to acknowledge, I think it's a very, it's needed. I've been on the coaching side. I think ADs are hiring fundraisers. They're just looking at money coming in as opposed to, how can we still bring money in, but now allocate for a bigger return. So I just want to acknowledge, I think your work is needed. I think it's needed not only at the collegiate level, but now that some states are opening up for middle school and high school, I think it's huge. So what's you're an entrepreneur, right? What's your big idea in terms of that you can pass on to a student athlete who wants to create, wants to build their brand, and then become their own entity? So what is that big thing that you can pass on to them?
Ooh, they need to be obsessive about the creator economy. They need to understand cross platforms, how content performs. So for a student athlete, let's just say I was advising somebody who, has spent their generation or their youth watching YouTube, but that is the most that they, in terms of experience and exposure, that they have. I would first say, let's get you aligned with somebody who can help you start to create content, number one, because, kids have analysis paralysis and so do adults when it comes to creating content. We think of like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to edit. I don't have the attention span for this. I don't want to watch another, YouTube video on how to edit things. I just need somebody to help me. There's some resources out there that are available to kids now who, if they were to shoot, let's just say 15 minutes worth of content, they can send that off to an editor at a pretty affordable rate to chop that down into a 60 or a 90-second post for these kids to put into their social media. Like, we can find them the resources that they need to just get started, number one. I think from there, we have to teach them about how to tailor their content as they start to get their rhythm and they find their footing with it. We have to find what works best for each social media platform. So for example, like when you get started, just start posting every piece of content that you have across all of the platforms. Diversifying your social media platforms is the best way to maximize your earning potential. So cross post on, not just on Meta's, Instagram, but also on TikTok and also on YouTube. Obviously be careful of watermarks and make sure that you're in compliance with all of the platforms, but cross post. And then as you start to find more time and more inspiration, then tailor your content to your Instagram audience, to your TikTok audience, and to your YouTube audience. People sleep on YouTube. Please don't sleep on YouTube ever, because you have a huge earning potential through YouTube. And YouTube recently, earlier this year, had talked about how discoverability is even greater now, because a view is now constituted as a 1 second moment versus 3 seconds prior to. So now student athletes have an opportunity to be discovered a lot faster based off of the algorithm. Adam Mosseri from Instagram recently said, we are putting the algorithm in the hands of the consumer now. So if your content, again, for lack of a better word, if it sucks, it's going to disappear off of the phone of, a potential viewer or a potential subscriber. So we have to be really intentional about the kind of content that we create for, your audience, and who you're trying to target as well. For me, I would love to talk to athletes and to parents, so my content is tailored for that. And I know what works for me and what sparks dialogue and conversations and DMs. So I stick to that formula. But for these kids, as they're testing and adjusting their content, we have to be obsessive and teach them about the analytics and how to look at their dashboards and to say, okay, you're 3% here on Instagram, but you are a 10% here on TikTok. We need to do more of that, and let's boost up your Instagram. So we have to teach them to be obsessive about this. Obsessive within reason. Obviously, we can't allow them to dip in grades and dip in performance in practice or in their games. But again, it's just teaching them that obsessive nature, because eventually, as that obsession grows, then they start to figure out what they want to do long term. Maybe they decide they want to become a social media manager for a brand. One of my favorite social media brands out there right now is Wendy's. It's completely unhinged. The person who has created the Wendy's persona on social media is absolutely insane, and I love it. And every other brand starts to chime in and sound as almost as similarly as unhinged as they are. So Wendy's has made a very niche voice for themselves in the social space, but maybe these kids become so obsessive that they become the next social media manager for Duolingo or for Wendy's or for Domino's or Pizza Hut. But we want to make sure that they feel like they've got all of the information, of how to do it from soup to nuts. And I say that this is the Shaq method, right, of building your brand. Shaq and I had a very brief conversation at Super Bowl in Atlanta years ago, and I had asked him, how are you so successful? You do everything. You're everywhere all the time. How do you do this? And he said, well, I learned my business from the dishwasher in my Papa John's franchise on up to the floor manager, and I understand then the district manager and the president. He goes, I want to do all of these jobs so I understand how my business is profitable. So let's apply the same method and idea to these kids, understanding their business, growing it, and then bringing in the resources when they become successful who can take the volume away from them and can do the work of going to source partnerships and brand partners and things like that. Of course, you're going to give up 20% of your check, but at least you know how to do this business before you bring somebody in to help you.
Right. No, that's good. Okay, last question. One word answer. The future of NIL is blank.
Oh, it's amazing.
I love it.
It's amazing. When I look at where I was 20 plus years ago in my athletic career, I never would have imagined that it would be here. I mean, the growth and the respect now that I think NCAA and the institutions are now paying to athletes and, saying we value you, we understand that for decades we have limited your opportunity to earn, but now we have this opportunity for these kids to earn on their names and their NIL in general. That's amazing. The growth from where it was, early 2000s when I graduated to today, wild. I love this space so much, and I think there's so much potential. So I say that the future of this is amazing.
It's a good point, and I think everyone needs to wrap their heads around the fact that we could move this thing forward and everyone gets to eat, So Kalei, thank you so much for everything that you do. I definitely think it's a added resource, a needed resource from a administration level on down. To all of you, thank you for joining us again. Look for a new episode every Tuesday on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Thank you much.
Thank you.